One of my favorite things to do using ON1 Photo RAW is editing old photos. And today I have a photo of my daughter from 2013 when I got into photography. So this image is a JPEG. I just love the facial expression, and that's why I want to work with this photo. I don't think I've ever edited this photo. So let's see what we can do with it in 2025 with ON1 Photo RAW 2025. All right, so first things first, I got to figure out what I want to do here. So I think I want to get rid of this area down here, which is a distraction, probably some of these chips in the table, maybe this sippy cup, and then really focus in on my daughter here and make everything else kind of fade off into the darkness. So first thing that I'm going to do is start working with removing the distractions. So I'll come over here to my retouching area, and I do have a video showing how I use the healing brush. So if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and check the description box and you'll find that video. But what I'm going to do is just go ahead and let's see, we got 100% opacity, feather, and I'm on stamp, which I think will work out just fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint over this area like that. And that actually did a really good job, so I'm okay with that. And we'll paint into this area as well and make sure that we get something. Now I need my indicators, so let me just close this out and then we'll open it back up and I should get my indicators. There they are. It's sampled up here, so let's just go ahead and pull that down to somewhere around here, which I think is good. So that issue has been resolved. And so these little pieces here are easy to take care of. Like, I don't think ON1 is going to struggle with this one bit. So I'm just going to work through here and just clean up the ones that are like the most distracting, because I think everyone can tell who the star or the intent of this image is, and it's my daughter. The problem is there's all these little things that keep minimizing or distracting, at least in my opinion, from her. So I'll just clean up this last little piece right here. All right. A lot of cleanup work, but I think that it definitely helps out. It takes this photo from where it was to a better place overall. So now it's time. I'm just making sure that there's nothing on her that I wanted to clean up, but I don't think there is. So I'm going to go ahead and commit those changes. I'm going to leave the sippy cup for now. I can always come back later and get rid of it. Now, because this is a JPEG, and I know that when I was first starting out, I didn't know what I was doing with the camera. I just went with JPEGs and I like what I was getting out of the camera. And I don't really have any issues with the exposure of this photo. My daughter is well lit. The background is not so much, which is why I want to go ahead and create a depth mask and then just darken down this background. So I'm just going to jump over to local. I don't really need to do much of anything in the develop section. We're going to add this adjustment. I'm going to right click on my layer mask here, or my adjustment mask. I'm going to come down to create depth mask. And if you're not familiar with a depth mask, all it does is it selects the things that are closest to you. Let me change my overlay here. And it doesn't select the things that are further away. Now, for this particular photo, I am getting the opposite effect of what I want because it's selecting my daughter and I want to select the background. So I'm going to right click on the mask icon here. And then I'm going to click invert mask, and I'm going to go ahead and come up to masking. And this is one of those things that's trial and error where you have to play around with the mask to get the right areas selected, or the areas that you want to have selected to get those selected. And if this doesn't work, then I'm going to do a different method, which I don't think that this is going to work for me because I want to select that table in the background, but it's not selecting it because you can see that it's black or gray, which means that it's not getting a good selection. So I'm going to go ahead and right click, reset this mask. And then this time I am going to hit the letter O to bring back my image. I'm going to hit the letter W, and this activates my AI quick masking brush. This is one of my favorite tools to use. And back in 2013, I would have never thought that I would have a tool like this to use to make a selection of my daughter. In fact, I wasn't even using ON1 back in 2013. I was using Lightroom back when you could purchase Lightroom and own it. So that is a fun fact. But I'm going to go ahead and keep her selected. And since I know I want to change the background or what's behind her, I'm going to go ahead and hit erase. And then I'm going to hit the little check mark. And it's going to remove her from this negative exposure adjustment. So now if I hit the letter O, you can see I have a pretty good selection of my daughter. And I'm selecting the background. So if I darken this down, I just get her completely isolated. Now, that's not what I want. I want the background to just be a tad bit darker. So maybe something like that. And then what I'm going to do is select my mask again. I'm going to hit the letter M on my keyboard to get the masking bug. And what the masking bug allows me to do, if I just hit this plus icon, is it's going to allow me to erase a section of the image. And since I want to gradually fade this into the top, I'm going to rotate this around, and then I'm going to pull this down to the bottom. And what's happening here is I'm not going to get any of this negative exposure effect at the bottom of the image. And as I pull this dotted line up, it's going to fade it in gradually. As far as that negative exposure that I just applied, it's going to fade it in gradually to the background. Anywhere that you see white, that negative exposure is going to take effect. Anywhere that you see black, it's not going to take effect. And then anything that's gray just means that it's going to take a little effect there. So I'm okay with the negative exposure kind of taking up the bottom portion of the image here just a little bit, and then taking its full effect going all the way back. And I'm going to do this while looking at the image. I just want to get a general idea of what it was going to look like with the overlay turned on. But now when I have the actual image in front of me, this is the way that I recommend everyone works, is you have your image in front of you and you just turn it off and on. And then as you realize like, okay, maybe that's where I want it, then you can just kind of fade this back, right? So the further down that transition is happening right around this line. And so that's what I'm really looking for, is where is that transition happening? And I think that this is okay. It's subtle, but it does make a huge difference. You can really see it when it's turned off, when it's on. And this is one of the things that I always recommend when editing photos. Make your adjustments look natural to the image, because the more natural they look to the image, the more likely people aren't going to figure out that you did something to the photo. I didn't do anything drastic here, but it's something that, you know, the background is not very important. It is okay for it to fade a little bit. Now, the other thing I like to do to my backgrounds is pull down on the saturation. And not like crazy like this where it's just purely black and white, but I do like to bring a little bit of negative saturation. And the reason for this is, in order to make the subject stand out, you can do it in, two primary ways, in my opinion. The first way is through exposure adjustments. So you make the subject brighter and the background darker. My preference is to make the background darker and leave the subject naturally exposed, so that way I don't introduce overexposure to my subject. And then the other way is to include or exclude colors. So in this case, I'm excluding the colors in the background, which makes my subject more saturated. So she's going to pop off the background just that much more. And you can see what happens if I turn this off and turn it back on. And she was already pretty contrasty, but you can look here to the table. So her shoulder to the table, it's relatively the same contrast. But as soon as I turn on this adjustment, this gets darker, so it's more contrasted, which means she's going to pop off a little bit more, because we pay attention to things that are brighter than to things that are darker. And because I got rid of the color If I just bring this down, double click saturation to reset it. If I just pull down on the color, this is a very subtle look, but I can tell the difference. What's next? Well, we need to work with her, and I'm actually going to rename this. That's what's next. So we'll just call this background expose. There. That way I can come back to that at a later date. Her face is pretty well lit, but her eyes look pretty dim relative to the rest of her face. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust her eyes. I'm going to hit add exposure. I'm going to double click this exposure setting to reset. And what I like to do is increase the structure and then open up the shadows. And I also like to increase the highlights and boost the exposure just a little bit. All right. This is my starting point. And what I do, I'm going to zoom in here. So forgive me for zooming in too close to my daughter's eyes, but when you are making minor adjustments like this, it makes sense to zoom in. With a brush size that is pretty small and a feather at 100%, opacity at 100%, I'm just going to go ahead and paint into her eyes here. And the first pass goes over the entire eye. All right. And the goal here is just to bring a little bit more light and clarity into the eyes. Whenever you photograph a person and their face is prominently featured in the photo, like this one, it's always good to work with the eyes and make sure that they look the way that you want them to. And now that I've actually brightened these up, I'm noticing something that I need to correct. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab my healing brush here. And I think I'm going to set this to heal. It was set to stamp. I'm going to go ahead and select heal. And there we go. I'm just going to paint over this little piece right here. And then we'll sample somewhere. I may need to go smaller and sample. So let's zoom in and we'll delete that last adjustment. Make my brush size just a bit smaller here. Same size essentially as the thing you want to replace. And now what I can do is come over here and I'm just going to sample right around there. Yeah, that looks way more natural. So I can accept that and I'll call it good. We'll hit Command and 0 to zoom out. And yeah, that looks just fine. I'm not going to worry about that. We'll hit the blue check mark to commit that to the image. And it's always a good idea to look at where you came from. So I'm going to hit the backslash key. Here's the initial image right into ON1 Photo RAW JPEG straight out of camera. And here's where the edit has gone so far. All right. And I'm actually okay with this. I like that the plate is acting like a reflector. And you can see that kind of reflected in her eyes here. So that's kind of cool. But I think the plate may be a little too bright for my overall taste. So let's go ahead and rename this. Got to keep up with renaming my adjustments. If you ever watch one of my videos and you identify that I don't rename an adjustment, call me out in the comment section. I need to remember to rename my adjustments. And you should rename yours as well. So next thing that I'm going to do here is go ahead and darken down this plate. That's what we were working on. And there's a few ways that I could go about this. All right. For me, I think the best way to go about this is to use a radial gradient. So I'm going to come over here and grab my masking bug, which is right here, the gradient mask. And then instead of linear top, I'm going to select vignette and I'm just going to click and pull down on the exposure. And that's obviously giving me the opposite of what I want. So I'll come up here and select edges, and that is now putting that adjustment right inside of the circle. Now, when it comes to the radial gradient, let me just rotate this around a bit. When it comes to the radial gradient, it is a little tricky to get it to fit the subjects the way that you want, or the items that you're trying to fit it into. So you definitely have to play around with it. But after a little while of playing around with it, you will get it to fit mostly. And then anything that's overspill, you can just clean up with a brush and So don't worry about getting it absolutely perfect. Just make sure that you get it the way that you would expect it to be. And I think that that is probably okay right there. So now what I want to do, because I don't necessarily want a negative exposure, I just want to bring down the brightness. And so that's where highlights kind of come in, because I want to keep the purity of the white plate. I just don't want it to be as bright. So that way we can focus in more on my daughter. Um, and in fact, let me check the crop. I just want to see where yeah, so she's in the top third here. And usually you want to fill the frame with the thing that's most important when photographing people, which would be the face and the eyes. But I like this overall composition as well. So I'm going to roll with it, and we'll just go ahead and commit that. So, or I'm sorry, I'm not going to commit that crop because I don't want to crop it. I like where she is in the frame, and I think that it looks good. So not going to crop it, but what I will do is rename my adjustment. So, and I think that that's pretty good. So turning it off and turning it on, you can see it's just barely doing a little bit of an adjustment there. And that's what I like. I like subtle adjustments. Unless I'm going for something far more bold than what I can get with a subtle adjustment, I usually like to be as subtle as possible. So I think I'm done with all of my local adjustments, and now it's time to move over to effects. And one of the effects that I want to apply here is a color enhancer. And I always like to mess with the colors just a little bit to see where I can go with an image. Now, I've already desaturated this area in the background, so I want to make the selection of my daughter, and maybe even excluding the plate here. So what I'm going to do is click on the color enhancer, hit the letter W to get my Magic AI eraser tool. I probably just gave that a whole new name, but you know, hit W, you'll get this tool too, assuming you didn't change your keyboard shortcuts. And I only want to select her. So I'm not worried about the plate because the colors on the plate are irrelevant to me. But I do want to modify the colors on my daughter, or at least have control over them. What I'm going to do is click paint, and I am then going to hit the blue check mark, and that's going to apply the mask over just my daughter. And it looks like it missed this little area right here. So I'm going to hit Shift and X on my keyboard, and that gives me the paint in. And then I'm just going to, nope, I'm going to paint this in. Now I used the refine tool there because I didn't check. One of the things I wish ON1 would do is not allow or not automatically move us to the refine brush, because I like to use the regular brush, but I didn't check this time. So thankfully it worked, but typically I use the regular brush. And then when I do Shift and X, I'm just painting in white in that area, and it works out just fine. But nonetheless, I digress. We good. We got the selection. So let's go ahead and minimize this color portion. And we're just going to work with color range. And the way that I really like to bring back color in my images when I'm working with people is actually by applying I have a remove all color filter, or style, I should say. And I like to bring back the colors on my own. The reason is I get to see how it's building up in the overall image. Now, I've never really done this for just an isolated person versus the full image. So, hey, welcome to the journey. We're going on it together. But I'm just going to go ahead and bring back the saturation, starting with my reds, because that's where a lot of skin tones exist. So I probably want those to be reset to 0, and that's okay. And then we're going to come over to the oranges, and yeah, that's starting to look pretty good there. I don't need a whole lot of oranges because I feel like the photo was overly saturated in the skin tones. So that's why I'm really working with the color here. I didn't explain that well earlier. Let's see if I need to darken that down or brighten it up. I think maybe going a little bit brighter with it, and let's play with the hue and maybe something like that. I think that that looks good for the skin tone there. And then I know that her shirt, I think it was like a purple. So we'll just come over here to the blues because there's going to be a lot of blues. And I'm okay with her shirt being a little subdued. And then come back to the purples and we'll just bring back all of the purple because I want the clothes to look natural. And maybe, and this works really well when you have a subject that has different colors. And like if she had on a orange shirt, then obviously when I move the orange slider, this wouldn't work well. So then I would have to select just the skin if I wanted to do that. But because she has on this purple shirt, I can kind of play independently and kind of change the colors there. And I think I'll make that a little bit darker. Maybe we'll lean it more towards blue. And then I'll come into the blues and give that a little bit more saturation and darken it down. So that way she really does stand out in the overall image because her shirt is nice, but it's not that important. We'll come over to the magentas, or I'm sorry, well, we already messed with the purple, so we'll come to the magentas and we'll add in a little bit of magenta because that will impact those hearts on the shirt there. And it's also impacting her skin. It may be hard to see over the YouTube compression, but there is just a little hint of magenta in her skin. And I can see it in the, like the brighter areas up here as I pull the saturation up, but no worries. That's a very minor thing. I don't think anyone will notice it, so I'm not going to call it out any further. So now let's go ahead and turn this effect off and turn it back on. And you can see how her skin goes from this orange, overly saturated look to this more subdued look. And I've also controlled a little bit better the color of the shirt. Not that I needed to. I could have probably left the shirt alone, but why not? Because I'm already here. And I think that that looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and call this subject color change. Yeah, we'll do it like that. I don't know. And so now what else can we do to this image that would be beneficial for the overall photo? I think if I come here, add filter, yeah, I think it's actually pretty good. Here's the before image when it came straight out of camera, and here is the edited version coming out of the overall edit here. I think the last thing that I'll do is probably just throw a vignette on here, a big softy, because those work out pretty well on these types of images. And then I'll just go ahead and take my brush, hit Shift and X, make it larger, and I'm just going to paint this away from her face like that. Here's the before. And here is the after of the edit. I want to know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Are you exploring editing old photos with the new tools inside of ON1? If so, let me know what you're doing down in the comment section. If you want to learn how to use ON1 Photo RAW, consider signing up for a training call with me. A link for that can be located in the description box below. If you want to save some money when you shop over at the ON1 website, consider using my coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. It'll save you some money at checkout. I do make a commission off of everyone who uses it, but that's at no extra charge to you, and I greatly appreciate you supporting me in that way. If you got questions, leave it in the comment section, and until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.